Hello. Welcome. Hi, friends. I'm Kris. Hello out there in out of space of pandemia. I'm Kris Alvarez, and I'm here speaking to you from Neutral Ground Artist Run Center on this very sunny day here on Treaty 4. Neutral Ground Artist Run Center is right here on Scarth Street. I see people walking by wearing their masks. My two teenage daughters are helping me install some photos of burnt sienna onto a gallery, the window gallery, and waiting for some food to be delivered from Prairie Donaire. So that's where I'm coming from. And this is called the Roundtable with Trespassers. And what does that mean, Kris? Well, a while back, last year, Curtain Raisers, the independent theater company I'm part of and get to be part of, we collected some ideas about the land that we live on, the people that we relate to and don't relate to, the entitlement that happens when trying to figure out whose land is this anyways. And in terms of that conversation, it was manifested into a grand act of theater called Trespassers Waltz. I am continuing on in a project called Acknowledgement that has some of these similar themes coming up and questions. I have tons of questions and no answers. And I heartily welcome these friends, guests, artists to the table today to simply share some reflections and perspectives coming from this place. Does that make sense out there? I hope it does. In the spirit of relationship building and art, I'd rather start with a song. I'm going to take Neil Young's song and I'm going to share it out to you because this is a song that I played as a gift for a good friend of mine, Tristan DeRocher, when he landed in Wascana Park in a teepee last summer and landed into my heart unexpectedly. So this goes out to all of you who need a little love. La 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 la. Ooh, ooh. It's gonna take a lot of love to change the way things are. Can you hear this? Gonna take a lot of love. We won't get too far. So if you look in my direction and we don't see eye to eye, my heart needs protection, so do I. Someone's looking in the door at the center here, wondering if this is a concert. Sing it with me. It's gonna take a lot of love to get us through the night. Get us through the night. It's gonna take a lot of love to make things work out right. So if you are out there waiting, I hope you show up soon. My head needs relating, not solitude. Got a lot of love. Got a lot of love. La 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 la. Ooh, it's gonna take a lot of love. All right, let's dive into a conversation. You're welcome. That's a gift to you. I keep hearing it. Do you keep hearing this idea that there's too much divisiveness in the world? I keep hearing it this week. Have you been hearing it? It's too much, a little too much hate. And as much as I like to poke fun at the things that seem unintelligent in this world to me lately, I also need to send a lot of kindness out. That's what I feel today. So I'm coming from there, Terri, Judy, Jayden, and Rania. And so let's step into conversation. And I'm curious to know, the first thing I'm just going to throw out onto this cyber table. Where are you coming from today? Where are you coming from? I'm going to sip scotch.
I'm coming from out near Craven. I was hiking with my kids for the morning, and so I'm coming from having done a very thorough tick check on all the corners of my body because they were trying to get in the car, and we tried to leave them behind.
Well, that's literally, you're coming from some land. That's perfect.
I mean, it did feel very fitting.
And the reality of ticks that we have here. That's great. Oh, there's a good analogy in there somewhere, isn't there? How do we coexist with ticks? Anyone else? Where are you coming from? And this is iced tea, by the way. I know I made a joke, but it is iced tea.
Just a thumb, just a couple of fingers of iced tea. I'm coming from a birthday lunch with my mom and my dad on my front deck, where my husband made grilled cheese sandwiches for my parents, fancy ones, and a visit, and then some photos by an old tree.
Oh, nice. Happy birthday to Penny.
Thank you. Yeah. It was a lovely little time. These kind of piecemeal birthday visits that everyone experiences on their birthdays these days, like very sustained birthdays or any kind of celebration. In this year.
Yeah, we're all crafting that art right now, aren't we? Of like that way of a gather, like how do you gather but I'm noticing about that. I wonder if you notice it, Judy. It's interesting how these restrictions are making me go, okay, so what is the touchstone of that event? What do we miss that I can somehow create?
Yeah. That, and I feel like the thing that is usually missing is like the multitude of people all like in physical proximity. Just this like, But then what quality of a smaller gathering is missing when there's everyone all at once. So,
well, I'm starting to wonder with the larger quantity of gathering from before, how much I missed by now having to be forced to be in these much hyper local, smaller micro versions of gathering.
Yeah.
One silver lining. Don't get me wrong. I want a rager. I still want a big party. Okay. Terri, Rania, where are you coming from, you two lovely humans?
Rania, do you want to go first or do you want me to? You go.
Oh, thank you. It was an early morning today, so we went to the immunization clinic, and the way I presented it to my daughter, it's going to be an adventure. So get up early, about 6 a.m. And it was pretty quick, you know. It was fun. We packed some snacks and water and stuff like that, and it was quick, fast. So done. First shot.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you.
The road trip of 2021, right? Lining up.
Yes.
How did you feel once you actually had the shot? What was your takeaway when you were waiting in that 15 minutes of, the waiting you have to do after. Any thoughts about it, or just kind of?
It was actually very smooth, quick, and the nurse who gave me the shot was very nice, and yeah, I was just answering all these questions. No, it was good. It was good. It was very positive. I think it was really nice, smooth, fast. I thought I'm gonna stay maybe longer, maybe miss this this gathering. I thought, oh, I have lots of things today to do. So no, I'm glad it was quick and easy.
Good. Welcome to the table, Rania.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And how about you, Terri? Share with us where you're coming from.
Yeah, I'm coming from anticipation and preparation for the future, really. I've been cleaning and organizing and folding baby onesies because I'll be having a baby on Saturday if she comes on time. So that's where I'm at.
Wow, right? Like that's exciting. It's exciting. Any guesses at this table? Do you think it's going to be on time, this May 10th delivery arrival?
I know Terri to be very well organized and well planned, so I feel like.
Thank you. I hope so.
Judy, Rania, what do you think? Want to make a guess?
Yeah, I feel like it's a pretty punctual little person. That's my feeling.
I'm so excited for Terri. Just really excited.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So thanks for both of you then coming to this table, Terri.
Pleasure.
And yeah, so where are you coming from is a big part of the, a lot of times a question I'm asked, where do you come from? And so I'm going to switch it from our literal, where are you, and say, where do you come from? When it comes to this place, I'm really curious about how people see their home or what home means. And it's a troubling topic for some, or an intricate one. How do you find it? Is home literally where you are sitting right now? What else is included in that? I'd be curious to hear that from any of you.
Okay, maybe I could start.
Sure.
Well, it's a tricky question. Where are you from? For me, a little bit. Sometimes I feel myself. I come from everywhere. Well, because I moved a lot. As a kid, and then my last big move, was to Canada, landing in Canada. So, and along the way, whenever I moved, I was asked that question, where are you from? And usually by the name of the family name or the tribe name, because where I come from, we carry our tribe's names. It's very easy to people around me to identify the place I'm from. So you can't really hide if you need to. Born in Jordan, a Palestinian father, who was a refugee, and lived in Russia most of my childhood. Back to Jordan, did not speak any Arabic, had to learn from scratch, was about 7. And then back to visit Russia every summer until I was I think maybe 15 or 16. And then in my lived through my 20s and my 30s in Jordan, and then at the end, I think maybe 39 or 35, coming to Canada. So landing in Canada. So lots of movement.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before a bit. To anyone who's watching this with us or listening or watching it later, Rania and I have had a very deep conversation at the beginning of Trespassers Waltz, in that last year of us creating that project with curtain raisers. I was fascinated by hearing your version of home. And I got to tell you, you're one of the first people I've met, brown people I've met, who said, oh, it's a really home that's a real troubling concept or a difficult one. Yeah.
So I live in this question. Where are you
Yeah.
from? I lived in that question for a long time, and maybe it's that stopped. That tension stopped for a bit since I arrived here, which feels really good. And I don't have any intention to move actually anymore. I'm so happy right now. So maybe home is here.
Wow. What makes you so happy to be here? Can I ask right off the bat? I want to know. Curious. Because I meet a lot of people who come through and stop here. Like this is one of their stops and go, yeah, Regina, it's okay. I'm really trying to get to Calgary, or I'm trying to get to,
Well, I did not choose to come to Regina. I ended up in Regina.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, but I become a mom here. I got my own place. I got my own friends, my own community. I found my group. I did everything I did on my own. So it, although I'm far from home and family, but it feels good to be doing all these things, discovering all these different, roles and situations and meeting new people and finding new things about, myself too.
That's interesting that in a place so far away from your original home base that you're learning more about yourself here. I like that point. And I feel like my parents have mentioned that as longtime immigrants here now. They've been in Regina. They really, about 5 years ago, friends, I remember my parents went for a trip to the Philippines. And when they came home, I'm like, oh, were you sad to get to leave? They'd been there for 2 months. My mom said, no, this is our home now. Like, this is like Argyle Park, Goodfellow Road, being in Regina, the cold, even the winter. My mom was like, the Philippines, it's too hot and too chaotic and all these things that she remembers from before, but goes, yeah, that was a time and this is home now. So I want to say out loud, actually, and name something as Rania's speaking about this life of growing up far away and being here now and seeing all of your faces who I know grew up here or around here, Terri and Judy and Jayden, and to those of you who are watching and seeing this conversation about trespassers, us being trespassers, this roundtable about land. I specifically wanted to invite these folks, you folks, because we have relationships. And this kind of conversation for me requires a trust and a safety, because I do want to feel like I can be honest with you about how I'm seeing things or feeling things. And I really wanted it to be non-Indigenous people at the table talking, frankly. That was one kind of thought was like, I want to hear from white folks, brown folks who are not Indigenous. I want to hear from settlers because, I frankly and humbly, a lot of my Indigenous friends who are some of your friends and colleagues, neighbors, who spent lots of time educating me, sharing with me, generously giving knowledge and ceremony too, inviting me. So I just wanted to have this conversation with us to see, where we're at with relating to the people in the land. So the big question here was about home. How about you folks, Jayden, Judy, Terri? Any thoughts on how you claim it here, how you identify it?
I would, like, if I have to think about where I'm from, I think the place or the concept I identify most with is actually Regina, like the city. I'm born and raised here. I've spent some time living away, but markedly little in the scope of my life. And I'm like from this place with all of its complexity and joy. Like I sort of identify with being from this city specifically, and everything that comes with that, including the complexity of being a prairie city and being a city that is like designed to be a settlement to settle the land, and all of the problems that the relationships between different communities in the city have, and that's the thing I was born into. So I don't really identify with, or even frankly know much about, the longer history of either side of my family.
Right.
I know like my grandparents, and I kind of have a sense of where their parents, where they lived or how they got to, Canada.
Yeah.
But honestly, if I had to write the details down, it would be pretty vague. And I don't really know much past that. It's not a thing either of my parents talked about.
Yeah.
Like they didn't show up.
Sorry, I'm just seeing a note. There's background noise. It's okay. Jayden's on his coffee break at the kitchen he works at.
Yeah, my
right?
son's just preparing some lunch. Sorry.
No, it's no worries. I kind of like the real noise in the background.
Yeah.
Okay, can I ask you something real quick?
That's where I'm from. Yeah.
But okay, so complexity is a word you just brought up a few times in the city. Can you share one version, what's one of your earliest versions of clocking that this is complex, this city's complex? How young were you? How long ago was that?
I have a very specific memory of that. When I was 11 or 12, my mom signed me up for a job selling newspaper subscriptions door to door. It was like you got $1 if you could sell a Leader Post subscription, and a guy in a Suburban came to my house and picked me up, and there was like 8 other boys my age in the car, all white kids, and it was like Pinocchio, like Bad Boys Island, or like whatever it's called, Paradise Falls or whatever.
I like to call it Bad Boys Island.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where like I got in the car and it was like the boys were like swearing. They were all like 11 or 12, swearing and yelling. And he was like the cool older guy who would pick up the boys, and then they could all be bad kids for the night. And then he drove us to like 400 block Princess.
Wow.
And dropped us off and said, okay, door to door, go sell. And I'd never done it before. And for context, I was a truly innocent child. Like I was such a little boy till I was like 25. And so I just went door to door at night. Like this was like from 7 to 10. And so the things I experienced on that night, it was like very eye-opening for me, were walking around North Central at night and not knowing where I was in the city. And I didn't even know the concept of North Central as a neighborhood and all the complexity. I didn't know what that was.
Right.
But in that night, what I saw was like a lot of poverty, a lot of what felt to me like a variety of like home lives that were very different from my own. And then a lot of racist behavior from the adult who was driving us around.
Wow.
And all the little boys in the car parroting back to him everything he was saying. And they'd all been doing this. They all had been a part of this job for a while. Like they'd all done this like 20 times, and it was my first time. Wow. So he was like, he was like super racist about the neighborhood, about the people who lived there, about what we were going to see, and like asking for stories about like, what'd you guys see? Who'd you see? What did they do? And then he was like, being super general about the folks who live around here. And they were all like, yeah, like yelling it back. And it was the first and last time I ever did it.
Wow.
I went home and it wasn't even like a political stand. I just was like a kid, and I was like, Mom, I'm never doing that again. Like I'm never. So all of it, top to bottom, was so terrifying for me. That was the first time I remember like clocking the complexity.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that you have such a visceral memory of that. And I can feel that as soon as you said, like getting in the car, a bunch of kids, and just that kind of banter that's clearly been established as okay, right? Whatever it
Yeah.
is.
And was
Whether-
being passed on as like the cool way to think about it. Like in retro, I mean, in my mind, that guy was like 50, but he was probably like 25. Like he was just this,
right.
you know, and we were all like, wow, this guy's so funny. He's so cool. And he was also like a total asshole.
Yeah, that's really
retrospect.
real. I have those around that same age, that same feeling. Being at my friend's house and her big brothers that we thought were super cool.
Totally.
Yeah, with really horrible racist jokes. Yeah. Wow, thanks for that. That's really great. And I like hearing it from, where we're coming from, right? Because that is, I think what you've just shared is, I believe many of us have had experience growing up, that some instance like that. Yeah, Terri and Judy, do you want to bring in your version of what home's like?
Sure.
Yeah.
I very much feel like home is Regina, similar to Jayden, born and raised here. But I do have I do know a lot about like my both maternal and paternal family lineage.
Yeah.
And I come from like on both my parents' sides, like homesteaders, like Saskatchewan homesteaders. And when land was being divvied up in the late 1800s and early 1900s, that's when my family came here and settled in the southern part of the province near the La Flèche Woodrow area, Wood River area along Highway 13. And so that's where my parents grew up and are from. And I still have family in that area of the province. And I certainly grew up with that kind of, that like Saskatchewan settler pride, like, and it was something very celebrated, this kind of entrepreneurial spirit, this we work hard kind of spirit. The town of La Flèche was literally founded by my great grandfather, who moved west from Quebec in like 1910 when he was 14 years old. Like these stories that that run really deep, and then on my mom's side, this like her Irish roots and her uncles, who settled their homestead, and all of that. I feel like I've known that about myself and this connection to this part of the province for my whole life. And I think it's something I kind of wore with like with some pride growing up, that it was like, like it was part of my identity. It was a place we'd spend summers growing up, even though I always lived in the city. And what's so fascinating about it now is it's like that land in the southern part of Saskatchewan was like all Indigenous peoples to those lands were like completely and utterly displaced, and there is like no trace of who was there first,
for sure,
there that left, and so it's something I certainly think about a lot.
When did you kind of notice that? When did you clock that?
I think that's like as an adult for sure. Yeah. Like since we've started having these conversations around land and colonization. Yeah. And like similar to Jayden, like I have memories of beginning to like put together pieces of like this city I live is a complicated place, and there's things that I grew up not knowing that I'm discovering now. And that really, for me, I think came in high school. I went to Miller High School, which is was a pretty amazingly diverse place. I grew up in the suburbs in the East End, but went to Miller High School in the core. And my grade 9 social studies was a Métis man, Mr. Pelche. And I remember being in grade 9 social studies and learning about holistic thinking, because he really threaded like Indigenous perspective into his teaching. And I remember, ways he would talk to the Indigenous students in the class about like mentioning things I didn't know or had never heard before, and being really like curious and like aware that I was like, that's new to me. I have this memory of being in grade 9 and a person who was in my class was late for class, and he walked in, and Mr. Pelche is like, "Oh, did you come in from Piapot today?" And the student's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Cool." So he sits down, and I was like, "What's Pi?" Like I didn't know what these words were, but I was hearing them. And
Interesting. Neat. This is at grade 9?
Grade 9. But then we've reflected on it, because at Miller they had, as you'd go through your years, you could choose between taking social studies or taking what was then called Native studies.
Sure.
And my parents, for all my siblings and I, they said, you will take Native studies. And we were like, okay.
I heard your sister say that. Yeah.
Yeah. And we didn't know why, it's not like they talked about why. And as adults, we've been like, why was that important to you? And I don't even think they really know. Like, they're like, I don't know. We just felt like it was a good idea.
Wow.
And so I had this like perspective.
Yeah.
But I remember in grade 12 writing a paper about residential schools, but I remember it being historical. The thread wasn't there yet, in 2004 to like connect it to what is like how these occurrences are still like resonating and echoing but it was like at that point it was like this thing that happened in like this historical event. And so and when the TRC report came out and people who were like, I didn't know, like people saying that, like, I didn't know, I was like, I knew those existed because I learned about them in high school. But then being aware that I was like, I guess other students I went to school with weren't learning that.
Did not learn that. Yeah.
And so I feel so much gratitude for that teacher who's still at Miller, Joseph Pelche. Is just like, just such a, like, wow, like what a gift he's given generations of students. Yeah.
I'm really happy to hear these touchstones from both you and Jayden about from teenage, because I am curious as we're going into complex territory of trying to figure out things. And so I think these are important. These are useful to hear because that's where it's coming, where it's beginning or starting off to bloom a bit, these notions of complexity of something's not the same here or not accurate or represented. Hey, Terri, how are you? Want to chime in on this? Are you
Sure.
As you're hearing all of these different versions of home, where are you settling into home?
Well, Regina is like a piece of my home because I came here to go to university in my early 20s and have lived here on and off for 20 some years, mostly on for the last decade. And but like when I think about home, it's really still, I even refer to it, the place where my parents live, which is on a farm in the southeast corner of Saskatchewan, near Kenosi Lake, near Manitoba. Both of my parents were born and raised there and lived elsewhere for a while, but then moved back when we were all very young. My siblings and I were very young. And so we were raised with our grandparents like all of our cousins. I was related to practically everybody in town, you know. And so for me, when I think about home, because we were a small family farm with my dad farmed with my uncle and my grandfather. And so like it's a lot about direct connection to the land and working with and on the land. I grew up gardening and learning all of this amazing knowledge from my grandmother and mother about growing plants and nourishing our family and canning food and working on the farm in lots of ways. And, you know, we had some pigs and chickens and ducks and cows, and we really like sustained our family from the work that we did with the land. And I just remember always loving that, like that rhythm of working with the land, of being on the land, you know, and recognizing the magic of, like, you know, when it's sunny outside and then it's also raining at the same time.
Yeah.
And in other languages, there are specific words that define that exact moment. We don't have a word, as far as I know, that describes that distinctly, but like things like that, and just understanding, like you could sense when a storm was coming before there was any sign of it, really, you know, things like that. I remember being really attuned to that. And so that was really formative for me. And I still think of that land as home, although like Judy and Jayden, there were moments growing up where it, you know, I began to realize, oh, that like there were other people here before, but we don't talk about it.
Okay,
like
so
my
you
grandfather.
as a young person, because I'm curious to hear your perspective as a kid who grew up rural, like, because I don't know that experience at all. So I'm fascinated to know where does the awareness about, oh yeah, there's brown folks that used to live here, or there's lots of other kinds of people, or and I'm also curious to ask you, Terri, like, did you feel like you owned the land? Like, this is my land, like this is my family's land. How did you feel about that as a young person? Sorry, I'm throwing lots in your way.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that I did feel like it was our land, you know, like that's how people refer to it.
Yeah.
But we kind of, you know, like the back 40 or the, you know,
right,
whatever,
right.
You know, you have lingo for this land that you work with and you return to every season and take care of. Like, but there was a lot of like more sense that it was like a partnership, maybe. Like the land was nurturing us. Like literally, my parents didn't have a lot of cash, so like there were winters where that was what we raised, was what fed us, you know. And like but the wider community, it's a shame, but the wider community is super racist, sexist, homophobic, all of that going on. And so I was surrounded by that growing up, even though it wasn't like something that was supported in any way within my home. It was there. It was very, very present and around us all the time. And so
in around you, but not in your home as much.
Yeah, like I remember once repeating a so-called Indian joke that my older cousin had told me when I was about 8. Yeah. And I just thought it was a joke. Like, I'm just repeating a joke. Jokes are funny, right?
Yeah.
And we got in big trouble, you know, like big trouble. And, you know, and it's like really challenging because you're growing up and your wider community is really conveying this message of what the world is like.
Yeah.
And what's accepted and what's not. And there was one Black kid in our school. There was one Indigenous family, and everybody else was white.
Yeah.
And so it was complicated to navigate as a kid who didn't know any other worlds too.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to just quickly interrupt to say, Johanna, our other guest, is at the door, and I'd love her to join. She can join in while we keep talking for sure. Hi, Joe. We're just in the middle of a conversation. Oh, she's just probably tuning in. I'll wait for a sec. Hi. Just asking Terri a little bit. I'm glad you made it. I was actually saying earlier when I heard you'd be a little bit late, excellent. This makes it feel more real to me, like we're really gathering. You know, I always come late. That's usually me. So thanks for being here. Terri is sharing a bit about home, or what that looks like for her and how intricate that is. I am very fascinated. I don't know how you folks feel at the table, but with with a perspective of growing up in small town or farm, because I wonder about when elections provincially happen and I see all the sea of freaking conservative, sorry, my opinion, of going down and being like, right, okay, what, and yes, there's some folks in my life who are card carrying conservative folks, and I love them and respect them, and I see a lot of racism in a conservative world. So I want to ask you, Terri, like as a kid, so when you see that, when you say I got into big trouble for telling the quote unquote Indian joke, what's the big trouble? What does your parents say to you that you think drives home for you? Or is it punishment? Is it like you got grounded? Or is it certain concept or words that they mention? Because I think that would be useful to me to remember when I'm hanging out with young folks in small towns, when I'm doing workshops. Like, I'm really curious how to infiltrate that place called the rural area. Because I know there's kids out there who are still trying to figure that out, like what you were. So what turns you? It's your parents who are clearly saying this is not okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I remember exactly what the consequences were. I just remember that it was really not okay and not accepted, and I was made sure that I knew those kinds of jokes were not okay to repeat, that it was not okay to make jokes about a certain group of people as though they were something to make fun of, and that it was mean and hateful and not okay. And so,
and what about your friends, like friends from school? Were they in that same way or no?
I mean, I never really felt connected to most of the people I went to school with. You know, I'm not someone who has friends from high school. They're not people that I keep connected with.
Okay.
I mean, which doesn't mean that some of those folks haven't gone on to evolve their worldviews as I did. But I would say the evolution really began to happen for me when I came to university. And I got to find my people, and I got to like learn from people who didn't live within that worldview. And, and then of course, in more recent years, there has been this really rich conversation about land and about settlers and the part that they played in and continue to play in colonial pursuits. And it's really been a lot of growth, which I'm so grateful for.
When did you first understand, or when was one of the first times you understood that this is not just our land? This is not our back 40. Someone else was here before, and this was taken away.
Honestly, it began when I was very young, because my grandfather, as he worked the land, would collect Indigenous tools. He would find Indigenous tools as he was working, and he would collect them. And there's this big collection. And again, that feels really fraught because they're not our objects, you know. There's like thunderbird eggs, and there are tools and all kinds of these objects that are so beautiful and powerful and culturally important. And who do they belong to? You know, like they're like our families, but they're not.
Yeah.
And so but he loved them, and he collected them along with like blue glass bottles and other remnants of like settlers who'd been through before, you know? And so there was just this dusty shed that he just had like kind of an altar of all of the shelves full of all of these objects. And I would just go and hang out with them. I remember doing that from like very, very young age. I loved being with them. They felt like a family. And, you know, I don't recall, unfortunately, my grandfather died when I was 15. So we hadn't really had the opportunity to have those conversations yet. I don't really know how he felt about them or why he felt compelled to gather those items and keep them in the way that he did.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Yeah. Are they still there? Do you still have at home?
They've actually, since my grandmother left the farm, some of them are still there, and some of them have been like she recognized them as these important objects.
Yeah.
And so when she left the farm, she made sure that every one of his descendants got one of them.
Oh, wow.
And so it's this weird thing where they're like around now, and they like belong to people who they don't belong to. And, it's just this really weird, it's actually something that I'd love to make some artwork about, because I feel like it's a really poignant space for that conversation. And I know that we're not the only settler family who has those kinds of objects in our possession too.
Absolutely. I've heard this from a few other families who have farms, like they find arrowheads and tools. So I love that you're sharing it. Thank you for sharing that, because I do think that layer of home and from where you're coming from really adds to this conversation. Hey, Johanna, so I've been asking everyone, and I'm going to turn it to you so you have a moment to come into this conversation. While I do this, folks at the table, I want you to ruminate, if you can, on what I'm going towards after this. So Johanna's going to share a bit about what I was asking everyone, Joe, is where are you coming from today, and what is home at this point? What does that feel like? 'Cause I'm curious to hear your version. And for the rest of you listening on this, in the back of your minds, if you want to rest this notion, are there conversations with your families, your relatives, however immediate or not, about this idea of ownership in land? I'm thinking of it only from talking with Terri now about her grandparents, right? Like, are these conversations happening at your table with your families at some point about the entitlement that your family farm had, that your family has in terms of being white settlers? Rania, what's that version for you in terms of your family relating to you now being a Canadian right here? So just in the back of your mind. Johanna, how are you doing? Where are you coming from today?
I'm sunburnt and coming from a walk
Mhm.
close to Craven, and we went up to walk this morning. So it's kind of a nice place to arrive into this conversation.
Hmm.
And yeah, I guess I locate myself as a contemporary artist and white settler heritage, of Russian and German settler heritage. In the north, kind of by PA, is where my family, where my dad's family settled, and in the south, around Avonlea, is where my mom's family settled. And yeah, is at home, like where I locate myself. I have often located my identity within my larger family, less with, or mostly with my French relatives, and my Francescois heritage, which is mostly held by my cousins and my godfather, my Uncle Gus, and my godmother. So within my own heritage, I've kind of like, it's not the most prominent part of my identity, but I recognize I've located myself within that part of my family heritage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned cousins, and curious to hear, growing up, this extended family that you're speaking of, did you get to see them often? Is this a regular thing to gather throughout the year, or and what was the relationship like that you had within that, like locating yourself within that family unit? Where were you? Who were you in that family unit?
Yeah, I was like, we often gathered, like, for holidays, for like big Catholic family, lots of gathering and celebrating around Easter and Christmas. So often, yeah, gathering for church services and meals, and and then my memories of that, the family, the Dubois family, that I've felt kind of like, I always thought if my parents passed, I would go live with them. And I think in my dramatic side, I kind of like, imagined that, like, what if I was a part of this family, and they held more song and more, a little bit, they held a little bit more like of, I don't want to say like reverence for the past, but there was something that was really artful in their way of understanding identity, more so than my like kind of like more, the other side of my family is more like laboring with their, more like industrious kind of.
Okay. Sorry, remind me, the one that you're talking about, the family, where are they? Were they in Regina? No, this is like.
we're kind of in Regina and then in Saskatoon area, but
Okay.
up by like Doremi is kind of where the Doremi.
Oh, I don't know that. I don't know where that is.
Yeah, I haven't spent much time up there, but yeah. So most of my time with them was in Saskatoon.
Got it.
Yeah.
I asked the rest of the friends here at the table about like, well, actually, maybe I didn't ask Rania, but the friends that grew up here, for example, you know, the word complexity came up when Jayden first shared, and Judy echoed it in terms of noticing who's in the place that I call home or Regina, anyways. Do you have any recollection of how, in early times before being an adult, of noticing that in this city when you were growing up, of like noting, like, well, yeah, there's a lot more kinds of people that I'm not aware of that I'm now starting to notice here.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I grew up in a very, very white context, like
Yeah.
in South Regina. My like friends and remain my friends like Payson and Sabrin Rock, like they were the only Black people I knew. I didn't have any. It wasn't until I was like it wasn't really until, I'm trying to think, until maybe like my early 20s that I found myself in art contexts where I started to be in a studio with Indigenous artists or really meet any Indigenous people. So yeah, it's very.
Thank-
I'm young in my relationships.
yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. Let's open that up to everyone at this point. And I know we're being really careful with sound, but I'm okay with us all unmuting for this moment. Let's take, it's 2:00. I would like to, for the next 10 minutes, I'm offering the table, you guests, let's dig into anything that's already been said or that feels like has lifted off from what people have said, if you've got some thoughts. And that includes, I'd like to throw that onto the table. Like, I read a meme that Jory Kashin shared on meme. I'm so old. I wasn't a meme, Chris. Great. Crying out loud. On Instagram, though, she shared this really cool post in her story about diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism, and how they're not interchangeable. They're, you know, but the word diversity beside it, the meaning, it said, who's in the room with you? And so I ask you, dear friends, like, do you feel like now, because we were talking a bit about who's in the room with you? Do you feel like your room is diverse? And why not if it isn't? And why or how? So I'm going to throw that in, but also if there's other questions or comments from these last shares, let's go away.
I just want to say something. I completely resonate with Terry's story. Her home story. So similar to what I lived. It's when your home is different than your larger community. This is such an interesting thought, interesting idea to explore. So I lived in this house with a Russian mother, Russian Orthodox, Muslim dad, a Palestinian. We celebrated everything. We did not. I don't remember asking question about what am I, like I am this or that, and never. We accepted everybody. I just when Terry was talking, I was like, wow,
yeah,
this is so interesting. Like, how does that change us as individuals? Being raised, because like my family was very protective of us, and my dad, God bless him, he taught me double standards early on. Because you have to, living in the Middle East, you have to, because when you step outside your home, everybody asks you all these weird questions of like, what's your religion? Do you pray? Are you fasting? Are you not? Why your mom is like white? Why your dad is brown. Like,
Yeah.
so I go to school and I have to participate. I had to participate in all these different activities, right? And I wanted to belong, but at the same time, I had my own identity, like my family's, I think, very special identity. And now I'm trying to pass it on to my daughter. I see how complicated that is. Like, it's hard. It's really hard because now I have this layer of, because she was born here and now she's also Canadian. So Canadian born. So that's another layer. But I'm so, I'm so impressed with Terri's story. I'm just like, wow.
Rania, did you feel growing up? I love that. That's such an interesting parallel. But I was wondering if you felt, I sometimes felt like I had to just go under the radar, like just go along with things. I wasn't brave enough always to stand up and say things, probably most of the time. Did you feel that too? And did you feel that it led to some, I feel that it made me more adaptable. It made me understand what adaptability means.
Absolutely. I would fit anywhere. I don't know how it's so easy for me. But because I lived in such diverse culture at home. My mom spoke German. She spoke Russian with us. My dad spoke Arabic with us and Russian. I don't know, language was always there. So it's like so interesting.
That's so neat. I also feel an attachment to what Terri shared. It's fun. I'm so glad you brought it up, Rania, because I think that's, it's a totally other perspective, right? I had an immigrant family who, frankly, had some really steadfast, old country ideas for their firstborn daughter. And I struggled hard with it. When I was a teenager, I was often embarrassed by my culture and my family. So it's a different version, but it's this idea that I could tell that our family was very different than what was going on out there. And for a while, it was a place of tension, but for often it was a circle of protection for me too. That's kind of what I feel like for home. Neat. I love that you brought that up, Rania, and that you have that feeling with Terri's. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Yeah, dig in. This is our conversation. Go ahead.
Kind of lost that prompt. Kris, I'm sorry, I lost that. There was something you put in the room and I kind of lost that.
Well, I'm just curious to hear more about do these conversations about complexity of relationships to other races, to the land, come up at your dinner table with your other family, your immediate family or extended? I'm also curious, from what Terri and Rania just shared, do you see a thread of connection in that as well in your experience? So it's a couple things. I'm throwing many things to you. It's a buffet.
Schmorg.
The thing I would respond to the most of something you'd asked Kris about, are the rooms that you work in, are they diverse in a way that is authentic, and I would say, often the room that I work in is me and my wife. So it's rarely diverse because it's just the two of us.
Yeah.
But I would say no, frankly. And yet, I guess the other thing I would say is in the last, I'd say 4 years, something I would note, I guess, for myself only, is that when I start making a list of collaborators or in my mind, who should I invite to join that project or who should be on that call or whatever, my default list of people I trust and want to go to and have not just people who I want to talk to, but people I've nurtured a relationship with, who I feel close to share intimate thoughts. That cadre of collaborators is markedly more diverse in the last like 3 or 4 years than it was before that. In a way that feels like authentic and not like I'm trying to build an Avengers team of people from a bunch of different backgrounds. You know, like, so I feel happy about that. And I've had some really great artistic relationships with folks who are very different from me. But I still think I think in the place where we live, I think most of the rooms that I occupy are not especially diverse places.
Yeah, I'm glad you say it, Jayden, naming it, because I feel it. As soon as I started Burnt Sienna a few years ago, along with you and Curtain Raisers, you know, I had to do the check. I was like, wow, man, I got a lot of white friends. I got a lot of white artist colleague friends, and they're great. Some of my best friends are white.
Wow.
You know, okay, so I'm being cheeky, but I want to dig into this because it's like, what the fuck? How do we change that up a bit, guys? Come on, right? And for reals, man, let's for reals. So what is it? Who's gonna do it? What's gonna happen? You tell me. I need to know how to make it happen. Like, I'm trying. Rania and I have been like, we got to keep talking, right, Rania? Like, we got to keep talking about bringing those voices in the room. I found the meme or the post that Jory shared. Diversity is who is in the room. Inclusion is who has influence in that room. Boom. I love that Jory shared that this morning. I was like, yeah. I do think that has to do with this whole thing of acknowledgement and land, doesn't it?
Yeah. I remember when I was about 6 or something. Oh God, my parents signed me up for soccer or t-ball or something, and I had to wear my t-shirt over my windbreaker, and I hated it. It was so uncomfortable. But I have often thought about this kind of like this zoning, this kind of like zoning in our city. And like I played soccer with like all the other rich white kids in the South End. And then like, because that was just like how it was, you gather at like that park and like super great park, great facility, super supportive families. Everyone went to Dairy Queen together afterwards. So and there's kind of a homogeneity in that experience. And I was thinking about that, like a couple years ago, Jayden and I like did a residency at Heritage Community, in Heritage Community, with Heritage Community. And it was like kind of like it was kind of like this way that I felt like, okay, I'm like kind of stepping outside of my habitual practice. Like for sure there's projects that I worked on that I feel like have been really, where I've been invited into spaces where I feel learning and lots of people who don't look like me. And I feel like I'm coming into all sorts of ideas and new ways of seeing things. But it was like when we did that residency, it was like kind of like stepping out of what my practice was to do that. And I kind of had the sense like, oh yeah, like I'm going to like the soccer field, like out of my neighborhood. Like, I don't know. It's just kind of something that's really specific. I feel like that's something that's kind of specific to Regina around like these zonings or these boundaries, these kind of, and that was a really rich time in my practice. Like I just feel like we got into ways of working that were really different.
Yeah. And was it hard?
Yeah, it was so hard. It was so chaotic.
Yeah.
It was so chaotic and so challenging to be like, oh, wow, I really, like bringing up all sorts of confronting in my practice, like, wow, I teach all the time and look at how I teach, how I lead, how I facilitate in very authoritarian ways, or how I bring my identity to circles Like
Wow.
we started to really look at this idea of a circle in our work we were doing through improvisation. And the way, and like, I think we kind of like went in with like, oh yeah, this, I don't know, Jayden, if you remember this, but it was kind of like this, like, oh yeah, like the circle. And like, we just really trust the circle and what a circle is and what a circle does. And by the end, I felt like so fraudulent. Like I felt totally like I had a light shined in my practice that was like, this isn't a fucking circle. This is like as much of a triangle as you can get, you know what I mean? Like, and then
So
not,
real.
and then, you know, at the end of like a big project resident, you're kind of like exhausted and depleted and also don't have
Yeah.
the peers or time or money to really unpack that and sit in that.
Yeah.
It's taken a long time to kind of do that.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for sharing that openly, because it is something I've felt when I did the Respond to Racism program through Commonweal. I was really humbled by it. Like I was like, I don't know how to bridge people. like especially when you haven't been growing up in representative groups, you know, of that truly represent who's around. And in the whiteness setting, I do think there's this way that we teach kids how to be in a class, how to be in a workshop, right? And when you're around kids who live in whiteness, we get it. And then when I grew up in it, I know how to play right, how to follow the thing, do the rules right. And then I'd get in rooms with kids who were brown in my residency with Commonweal, and it was like, whoa, right. I gotta check myself here. I don't know it all. And yeah, and I don't know how to connect those two things half the time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I try as I might, through humor, through story, through play, but it's like,
Yeah.
And I wonder if it has something to do with this land, I love the zoning thing you brought up. Any other thoughts on this?
Sorry.
You go ahead, Terri. No, you go ahead.
Go.
Well, I actually have to jump out right away.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm sorry to be missing the rest of this conversation, but I just wanted to say that I think one of the things that, I think we're all individually responsible for what we're doing to make things really different, to really make it different, not just give lip service to it. But as someone who works for an arts organization here, I do think that the systems are really, like the framework that we all operate within is so colonial and so rigid, and so leading the way still in colonial white supremacist ways. And the leadership is not really taking the steps that they need to. They throw around the buzzwords. What are they really doing to make it different? And that's not to be, I know it's a big thing to take on, but I don't think I see enough action coming from most of our leadership organizations. And that's something that I just want to throw down.
Yeah.
Before I take on.
To be clear to anyone watching, it's not because she's having the baby right now.
No.
Okay.
You're just so casual about it. You're like,
I gotta go.
I don't want to distract.
I want to put on this really coherent, awesome thought.
Thanks for being in the room, Terri. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. It's been a true delight.
Bye,
Good to see you, Terri.
Bye, Terri.
Okay, she left us with a big dish. Anyone want to dig into that dish?
I think connected to Terry's dish, but also what Johanna was just sharing. And it makes me think about like points of entry. And it's something I've been thinking about in my own practice, and how the kind of first 10 years of my professional life, like how formal, or how formal the context that I've been working and creating and really are, and how I've just, even in my independent practice, really mirroring these formal practices that exist in, in big institutions and under these like really cumbersome, really colonial structures, including, these particularly theater, these big organizations that dictate the processes and modes that theater can happen in, and how inaccessible it is for most artists, and how inhumane it is for most artists, and how there's this badge of honor that I think a lot of artists wore, like this like ability to work in a certain way with this certain kind of rigor.
Wow. Yeah.
Including myself, I think that, and now thinking about, how exclusive these models are, and then how in my own practice I can like be disrupting it all the time, starting with what I know, which is like my own relationship to it, and starting with my own recognition of like, oh, this does not sit well in my body. I'm tired today, or like I'm, or this leadership, I'm like, this leadership I feel uncertain about, or I feel suspicious of, or, and I feel, in this like journey to go to being, to like widening that pool of like, is it like how diverse, or what Jordy's inclusive, how actually inclusive the rooms that I'm in, and often the rooms I'm leading as a director under these theater models that are so inherent in this country and in North America, like, how much space there actually is for disruption of what we've assumed is the right way, and the power I have as a director to enter institutions and dictate certain terms and certain values, like that like power that I have, and responsibility I have. And then also so it's like when interfacing with like the leadership, as Terri was saying, like what my responsibility is, but then also what is my responsibility to like the team of artists that are involved, and like how is there space made for a multitude of entry points of like, teaching youth, or I feel like that's like a big part of the learning on Last Children, is like this morning I was doing a recording session with a 6-year-old, my niece, thinking about like, she was like bored out of her mind, and at one point said, "This is torture." And I was like, yeah, it is. And I'm like, I didn't set it up. Like, it's like, how can I set it up so that your process, 6-year-old, is honored in this,
And how can
or your process, any multitude of person, is honored. And it's like messy. It's so messy, and it's really hard work, because it's easier to like be a dictator.
Well, this is part of what I wonder for myself in the last 5 years, where I go, okay, just like in your relationship with your husband, Kris, if something he does bugs you, I can't focus. I got to if something's bugging you about the situation, I need to focus on what am I doing that's making it this way, as versus him. And I do this with kids now. Like when I'm hanging out with young creators, it's like, what's getting in the way that I'm putting down that's getting in the way, as much as what they're putting down that's getting in the way. I'm really aware that sorry guys, it's 2:20. I didn't take a short break. If you have to go get a glass of water or washroom, please do. I feel like just keep going right now. If that's okay.
Yeah, excuse me for a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like if we're sitting at the table, right? Like someone's got to go to the bathroom.
You know, that's I feel like excited about one thing that. Sorry, I don't want to. I'm kind of changing. What's the thing for kind of taking a new direction?
That's cool. Cool.
But just in that, I have this question about like coming out of this time of being online. I felt a lot more permission to self-regulate this past year, like with my health and with like, you know, I had like some health stuff like last month, and I felt my my inner dictator. I really felt my training and my bias and my upbringing and my background in the colonial art form of ballet, and you know what I mean? Like I felt all of my impulses to like push through, and I also felt like, oh yeah, right. Doesn't matter this Zoom call if I have my screen on or off. You know, like there's I think there's a lot of I like some of the language you're using, Judy, because it's like, how do you bring those values into the room? And I actually think like attending to the body and like attending to bringing in a language of like listening to what you need, and the buzzword around self-regulation, like what that is like, for me, I just needed to start there. Sorry, that might be kind of a shift of topic.
No, sorry. I was actually going to say, Joe, like if there's anything you folks had in mind, that a question or a concept you wanted to really introduce to the group, like please. I know I'm asking lots of questions, and these are everyone's offers have been really rich for me. I'm making a little bit of notes if that's okay. But yeah, if you have something you really were thinking about coming into this that you want to make sure you bring up, by all means, bring it in.
I'm thinking about like this collaboration that I've been doing with my sister the last year, which initially started as like we were like, I'm like, what? Where did it start? It started with this, like us recognizing kind of just these like our own relationships to like domesticity and like that, or the experience of being female and I guess
nice
like,
exhale,
you know, and then the experience, like the trauma of like, you know, these kind of generations of women in our family in different ways. And what, you know, so if we're going to talk about that, then like we need to talk about how, our settler heritage. And if we talk about that, then it's like, it gets like, it's like really messy really quickly. Like, it's like, as soon as you go out through like the concentric circles, it's like, okay, Missy and I can start with our relationship, but it's like, as soon as you like, then it became really massive and really big. And Kris, you came to like, we did a share of material in January, and we just with a few people in the room, our mom included, and it was just like, I felt so mired in it, like, and so embarrassed, kind of like I was just like, oh, this is so ugly, like this work that we're trying to do, and it feels, part of it feels like the work of like trying to make a show, but mostly it's like this work of trying to like wrestle with all this stuff, and it's like it's just not very interesting yet as theater or as performance, but a necessary step. And so then inviting people to like watch it was like so embarrassing to me, kind of like just like, oh, like but this, like, it felt like, you know, this necessary
and being in that room with you two, sharing, and having your mom in the sight line, who was like, it was really great. You guys would have loved it, because she would like give them information when they weren't sure about a memory. It was great. But I really
Oh
have
my
to.
God, keep that.
I know. I said she's part of
Yeah.
the show, right? Like she's part of the show.
And sometimes she kind of do it
Good
under
Lord.
her breath, but like not really. Like she'd be like,
It
as she was
made
wearing
me,
a mask.
it made me relate to you because like with Burnt Sienna, that's always been the thing with having my mom in the room. I want her there, right? It's like it's a ley line for me to have her there. And this messy work you're talking about, I want to say like when you did the beginning of the share that you did, you and Misty, of this new project you're working on, and I was in that room, I could feel the uncomfortable, embarrassed settler being unsure of how to approach. And I welcomed it. That's my nature. I welcome awkward feelings often.
So awkward. It was so
But-
awkward.
But it's so real. And in acknowledgement with Misty, your sister, with Chastity and Crystal, and now with Melanie Rose, I'm last summer I had that awkward like chunk of like, I don't know how we get through this part. And also a lot of sadness came through me because, as I joked earlier, I have lots of white artist friends. And I keep thinking about this idea of points of entry, like how do we have the brown people at the front, but we don't leave the white people who are trying behind? Because I've started to notice conversations like that where it felt like we were pushing the white people into this, I don't know, weird closet of shame or embarrassment about the word settler. And yeah, I'm just naming that to tell you, like, I don't know what that is. I don't know where that, the only thing I felt strong about was kind of doing this to arts organizations of like, hey, we're trying, this is difficult shit and you're not doing it, so just pass me some space and some money so we can go through it. Just gonna name that.
Yeah.
The best example just for me, the best experience I've had trying to participate in what you're describing, which is like not being at the front, but also still being included, and like learning another way of working in that way. Because I would echo everything Johanna said about the Heritage Residency, where it was like we're working with a ton of brown folks, ton of new Canadians, or I would include, for the purposes of this larger conversation, like people who are like quote unquote lower class. So like also like white folks who are living in just lower class circumstances, whose experiences are therefore like essentially mirrored, because they're just as undesirable,
Yeah.
to most folks with money. So it was everything Johanna described. It was very difficult, and it was also like we never got there. We never figured it out. It was really fun. We made great relationships with the individuals, but the system we were working with didn't do the larger thing. When it was over, it was just over. And we picked up stakes and the residency was over. The grant says it ends on June 1st, so we're done. The only relationships I still maintain are the folks from what's the I've forgotten the name of the center on Osler Street. Phoenix, who are adults with like acquired brain injuries.
Oh.
And they're always like wandering around downtown, and there's like 3 or 4 of them who like we still remember each other. So it's like, hey, we're all going to Safeway. Like those are the relationships that have still stuck around. Anyway, the model that I've experienced it's the only one I can point to, is getting to be a part of an artistic creation that I wasn't fully in charge of, but was invited to help shape, if that makes sense. But really brought in to help realize the vision of Indigenous artists. So the project wasn't my idea. I didn't initiate it. I didn't come up with with the reason to do it, but I was invited to participate in helping see it realized. So I got to bring my own skills and my own ideas and my own biases on how shows should look to work with material that wasn't my own. And it was germane to the room that I'm only my goal here is to help make sure these performers get the thing they want out of it. So if they need something, I'll do my best to provide it, but otherwise I'll stay out of their way. That's my best experience doing what you're describing. It's the best model I've had.
Yeah, that's interesting. With acknowledgement, I invited Chastity and Crystal to help lead it, and it was really hard to do that, right? And it was like, yeah, I'm interested in having those new versions of leadership in the room for art making, for community sustainability. Like Rania, I would love to ask you if you can add to this what we're circling right now, because, you know, as I mentioned with Jory's meme post, diversity is who is in the room. Inclusion is who has influence in that room, right? So I'm been lately curious about that second part, like who has that influence, and yeah, what do you think about that? What can you, from your experiences not here, but from afar, you feel like there's some things that you can bring into a room that would really help switch that up?
Well, I just want to say I love this group. I'm just listening to you guys, like it's just being here. It's a great feeling. I feel awesome. Like Jayden's thoughtful list of people. It's just to think of like having that list, you know, somewhere and going back to it every time. How responsible that is. It's just beautiful. And just that, like when Johanna talked about the zone, like her awareness of that actually being in a space that lacks certain, you know, lacks inclusivity, or, you know, people who are not represented for who they are. So it's just that awareness, you know, like being in a place and feeling that. And Jody's fighting with organizations, you know, but also thinking about her group at the same time. It's very hard to be like in the middle, right? And try to balance these two sides. I think conversations like this, like the ones that we just had, they are key to I think maybe get something or change something, or I was listening and I'm smiling and I feel great. I feel good. It feels like, well, look at these people in this group and how open they are, and how do you approach something like that except with openness and open heart? Sometimes I listen, I hear people say, white people say, oh, I don't want to be racist. I want to be careful. I don't want to say anything, you know, that's maybe not politically, you know, but that could be politically incorrect. And I usually think to myself, if it comes from an open heart, like if it comes from a place of love, and it will never be wrong. It will never be racist. It will never be whatever, you know. that thoughtfulness, responsibility, awareness, all these things that I was like listening to. These are great. But my experiences, maybe echoing a little bit what Jayden talked about, like being in the process of making art with other groups, different groups. I had the opportunity to work with North African performing artists, specifically in Tunisia, for a long time, and I wanted to stay there because their model of work is just amazing. So they so open up to new ideas. So most of them travel to Europe, France, Germany, not much England, but to get the technique, to learn how to do things, the tools, the skills. But when they came back home, they only worked with their stories. They only worked with what mattered to them. And the end results were amazing. Their technique, I mean, I'm talking about theater, performing arts here.
Yeah.
So their technique, fascinating, just fascinating. I worked with amazing people. Some of them were my mentors. So they had the ability to mesh, like they had the ability to put all these things together, and engage different people. They engaged us. We came from Jordan, Lebanon, which is like Asia. And they also engaged us in that project, in that amazing artistic process. So
I need to ask more about this. How long? Like how long were you in this process with that group particularly?
Well, it was more than 2 years, 3 years. Yeah, it was like I was traveling between Jordan and Tunisia, and we performed around. A little bit, I think Europe. We did something in Europe, and then mostly in the Middle East.
So I'm hearing you talk about how these performers, these artists, go to European countries, learn the craft, learn the technique, and then they fuse it into what their stories back home are.
And it's not necessarily going to learn from a place of lacking. No, it's just like contemporary artists, they will want to learn. We want to right. And then when they come back, this is so interesting. And there's a big role on directors, and for some reason in that area, is that each person had his own or her own thought, her own place, like a theater. And let's say I was attracted to a certain style, so I would go and explore that thought and that technique with that person. I mean, the way professionally, the way they worked, I hope they're doing well right now. I don't know what happened with COVID, but I've never seen artists go into theater and work for 7 hours, just like a 9 to 5 job. So they go in the morning, they practice until, my
mouth is watering. My mouth is watering.
Yeah. Like it's unbelievable. So 9 to 1, it's preparation, breathing, techniques, all that. And then the other side, like other part of the day, is like working on scripts and stuff. And
wow,
I did not want to leave. I want to stay, guys, and work with you. Just So
I just love that. Wow.
Yeah. How do we have? Yes, please.
How do we have that?
Yes.
Yeah. How do we get that?
Yes.
I just want to this is me trying to wrap a bunch of things into a bundle, but there is a thread here, which is about systems.
He's gonna wrap it up real tight.
Wrap it real tight. I'm gonna
give you
throw down the old white gun coordinator.
Welcome to Blue
here.
Sky.
We got
give it to me in 20 seconds.
17 minutes, so let's put a button on it.
25th floor and go.
There's a common thread here, which is about systems and like processes, and what are the systems you engage in. And when we're talking about and what do they do for you? And Terri brought it up, and I'm hearing it so deep in what Rania's describing. And actually, it's funny because earlier when Terri was talking, I was thinking about this friend of ours who's from Regina, Tim Hoffner, Kris, you would know Tim.
Yeah.
Who went to the Grotowski School in Poland.
Right.
And a couple of years ago, he was in town, and I was visiting with him, and I was saying, like, so, like, what happens at Grotowski? And he's like, well, we go in the morning, and we warm up, and then we sing together, and then we take lunch, and then in the afternoon we sing some more and breathe, and then we go home. And I was like, yeah, but like, what are the shows? And he's like, well, we don't do a show unless we get to the place where we think we have one. And I was like, so what are you building? And he's like, we're not. We're just developing. And he said, like, he was there for 2 years, and he said they did 4 performances in 2 years. And he said one of them they just did because they were like, they didn't even have a show booked. They were just kind of like bored. So they performed at like a house party because it felt right to do it. So they spent 2 years just developing their craft, developing their instrument, and building relationship with other artists.
Yeah.
And so I just think, like, the systems are broken. Like the system that put Johanna and I in a scenario where we were like trying to bring our practice like to the heritage community and make change. Like, that's a colonial system, like, and it doesn't mean
racism. Respond to racism. I always had trouble with the term. I couldn't stand it. I'd go into the Open Door Society office and they'd be like, what? No, they don't want to. They don't want to talk about racism. They want a job. They want to learn English right now.
Absolutely. And so it doesn't matter. I mean, there's something part of it that matters, that the intention is good. Of course, it matters.
Of course.
But there has to be an awareness that it can't actually fundamentally make change. It can help certain things happen. It can help build good relationships. Somebody learns, one student or two, that thing that kills me every time I hear it, which is like, well, if one kid was changed, then it was all worth it. And I'm always like, I don't know. Like, all of it was worth it. Like, well, if one kid really liked soccer, then the whole soccer league was worth it. He probably would have found soccer. That money could have gone somewhere else. Like, all of that shit was worth it for one kid to like diving. Like,
yeah.
It just seems like, the Rania, what you're describing, where like these artists seek out the things that are of value to them to better themselves and then bring it to their community, not to teach down, but to just like offer it up to the group.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's like a relational way of, if we're just talking about art making, that's such a beautiful, relational, vulnerable way of making things. It's not someone going to Indonesia and saying, this is how you work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there is potential. I mean, just listening to you talk about it, like, I just see your whole spirit light up. Like, there is then it's worth it. Then it like that's worth it. All the effort that goes into making a school or a theater like that, then that effort's worth it.
Yeah. Because
look at the concentric circles of change that are going to come out of that, and learning other people's models and sharing your own. If we're bringing it, I mean, I would agree. I think Terri said this. I think Judy said this too. Like, the larger organizations, despite intention, if they aren't fundamentally changing the ways that if they're not changing the system they inherited, they will just perpetuate it.
Yeah.
Despite their intentions.
Yeah.
And like the artists working within them, despite our best intentions, are
Absolutely.
just like banging our heads. And
being like, why doesn't it work now? But I have better intentions than the organization that trained me. How come it doesn't work? Because we're just doing the same thing. We're doing our version of it.
Our version, right. I'm imagining a section in our Curtain Raisers website / agendas ever for meetings that's just called Systems and Processes. From what you said, Jayden, like it is there. I see I know myself, I've generated lots of public expression this last year. And I also know it's actually just been me working on what I would normally work on privately, which is making a relationship happen. Right? So now I'm all charged up for us to meet in real life and make some art. Any final thoughts from the rest of you, as tightly put together as Jayden or not?
It wasn't my intention.
There's hardly room after
No,
that.
I'm very excited.
It was so good. I was so excited. And Rania, like this, I keep asking you more and more about your life from before, right? Because I can feel that there's so much there that I can learn from and a wish to apply here. And I don't know how else to do it except to have you in the room over and over again. You see.
Thank you for that, having me in the room.
Well, yeah,
Thank you.
and having the influence in the room. That second part is what I'm trying to tinker with right now. Like, yeah.
You know, I came to Canada to go to school. That was my intention, to experiment. Like, I just wanted to experiment with theater and physical theater and dance and film and visual theater. I'm still dreaming about it. I still want to do it.
Yeah.
So I keep dreaming. Yeah. With you guys today.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been a pretty full conversation here. And I like the idea that we can kind of leave it in the big blue sky. Like, so if there are any blue sky thoughts to leave on the table, what would they be from you? I'm asking, dear friends.
I would just, my question I would add be, sorry, go ahead, Johanna.
I'm inspired by this. I'm inspired by this. This systems. I just have this, this thing of systems, and just like, yeah, I'm inspired by. I don't know how to say. Sorry, I have some things coming together, but this idea of like just the failure. I don't want to say something wrong. Like that feeling of that. But also like by having a practice that grounds into like a first approximation or a starting point, like, when now I have Tim in my mind, or I'm feeling a practice we did with Trespassers while it's in the field. We did a practice that was a physical practice. It doesn't have words because it's not very performative, and it's just a practice that we need to keep on. I feel I need to keep on doing that practice with many people to feel into the complexity, like not to sorry, this is not wrapping up. This is so much.
Oh, please. No, sorry, please.
Sorry. It's just to feel into like, I need to trust that we started a practice with an ensemble, and that ensemble can grow and change. And I want to keep on doing that practice on the land with people because it's nonverbal. And I think that we can learn a lot by just leading and following and listening and not forcing something towards a grant or a performance. Or it really has to do more with like a daily practice. I want to do that from 9 to 1, Rania, and then I want to take.
I just wanted to, I was thinking about it. Yes, looking forward to that one.
And then I want to do it from 2 to 6, okay? Then I want to do that 6 days a week, and I don't want to show.
I loved how you asked us to move our heads, moving our hand. That was amazing. I was like, wow. That was, yeah. Yes, that one. Oh my, I was like, wow. I want to keep doing that.
It's an indirect way to get at the thing. Like, I think,
Yes.
Sometimes you have to take a really indirect way and try many different things to get at the And it's like that, but it's that like, but it's a fear of failure that would keep me from doing that. It's fear of making a mistake, saying something racist or whatever.
Absolutely.
From trying that.
It's funny. Sorry. Go ahead, Judy. Go ahead.
Thanks, Kris. That like, well, my thought flew out of my head. It's really gone. It was related to this, the excitement of this. Please, Kris, I lost it. It went away.
No, I'm sorry.
No,
I
you
interrupted.
No, you didn't at all.
We're in a really big.
Oh yeah, maybe this is it. It's like, I appreciate this conversation and just and all these conversations you lead, Kris, that are like that are so that you start from like who's in the room and like the relationship and histories and and like knowledge of like who already knows who doesn't, who's connecting for the first time, and leading from that first, that like relational place before there's like an agenda, before there's like action items, before there's subcommittees, before there's a conference. Because another, like, it's like, especially, as these conversations keep coming up, I'm like, gosh, is there a lot of like conferences about these kinds of things? And I think those are the spaces where I feel so much fear to say the wrong thing or that I'll misrepresent like the work I feel like I'm doing internally, but and that like never have I felt so comfortable in my discomfort, even right in this moment, but in just like how messy it all is, and it's so galvanizing and comfortable in its discomfort. Starting from like these conversations in this place that's like rooted in where we're coming from and like the histories, however short or however long. And I think that's like radical and exciting that it can start from this place. That's really cool.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. I want to say I want to meet you from 9 to 2 or whatever that time is again, and do 9 to 1, and breathe and move, and then I want to meet later on. Actually, I don't want to meet 2 to 6. I want to meet like 6 till 10.
Siesta.
And eat supper and look at scripts and look at text and look at I want to do that, and I want to continue being public with my private conversations like this, because I do feel that's where my urgency lays in my heart, and it keeps me up till 3 a.m. Is like I see people trying to have a fucking panel with an organization or trying to bring some brown people into a room for diversification, and I feel the urgency to show another way. To model another way, whether this is the right one, whether this works well for just the ones involved here, but that at least it's out in outer space, so that people can remind themselves, because often I don't remind myself that there's a myriad of ways that I'm not even at all, that I'm so ignorant to, which is why I want to hear about Tunisia, or I want to hear about, Grotowski, like when you brought that up. Now after this meeting, I'm going to go look up this thing. So so I really am deep bows to each of you for being, and Terri, who had to leave and have a baby. I'm just kidding. Deep bows to all of you for deciding, let's meet together. I'm going to name as well that without neutral ground giving me this residency, it's interesting that I wouldn't think to organize this. And so that for me, that's my thing where I'm like, oh, housekeeping, Kris, how come only when you are in that would you only offer that? Like it's good. I know it's good that we're doing this. And I need to push myself to do that in other versions. even when I don't get to be in this beautiful space that Amber and the Neutral Ground Center has offered. Yeah, I'm really thankful, Johanna, Jayden, and Judy, and Rania, and Terri, that you're here. And Amber, that you're holding up and supporting this online platform for us. Thank you, Amber. Yeah, so I guess we continue with these conversations. And I hope that you can set a table with another group of people who don't look necessarily exactly like you. Whoever, for all of us here, that's what I wish for you. A table with lots of good topics to feast on. And I would love to do this again with all of you.
Yeah, ditto.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And hey, Amber, would you love to? Okay, thank you, Amber, for taking care of us on this Neutral Ground platform. If any of you are watching out there or rewatching, I hope you can take this and call it your professional development.
Good one.
You're welcome.
Boom.
PD.
All right, we are done. That's an official
Okay.
done. I toast you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Can you stay for just a moment after we go off?